Welcome to Revisiting Brady, a public discussion that explores the identity of Tate Brady and his legacy on Tulsa. My name is Michael Mason. I'm the editor of This Land Press, Oklahoma's first new media company. Our mission is to chronicle life in Oklahoma through courageous and compelling stories. In past issues, we brought you stories that have garnered the world's attention, but it's our most recent issue that has brought us here tonight. In the issue that you saw coming in, reporter Steve Gerken brought you the history of a monstrous Ku Klux Klan temple that was located not far from here. A few pages later, the journalist Kevin Ross shared the remarkable story of Greenwood's power and resilience. And it gives us the hope that Greenwood will continue to flourish. But the feature article of this current issue is notable for its breadth of research and influence. Already, historians and academics have weighed in on the article's importance. In The Nightmare of Dreamland, Tate Brady and the Battle for Greenwood, This Land contributing editor Leroy Chapman uncovers a number of distressing facts about not only Brady, but about our community. Facts so painful and humiliating that many of us might have preferred to keep them at a 90-year distance. We are here tonight as a response to that article, but we are also here for reasons more profound. We are here to remember. This past Sunday, America paused to honor the nearly 3,000 people who died a decade ago in the 9/11 attacks. Every April in Oklahoma, we hold ceremonies to remember the 168 people who died in the 1995 bombing of the Murrah Federal Building. So it's in that same spirit of remembrance that we are here today to revisit the 1921 Tulsa race riot, an atrocity that is a part of the story of our community. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, died in that event, and as upsetting as it might be, our past belongs to us. We remember it in order to deepen our understanding about ourselves, and we do this with the hope that our understanding will lead to illumination and transformation. We are here to know ourselves and to grow. This evening, we'll listen to historian Paul Vickery perform a monologue in the character of Tate Brady, and following that, we'll have a panel discussion moderated by Ray Pearson. Following that panel discussion, we'll have a little time to answer your questions. If you're watching this event live on Facebook, we invite you to leave those questions in the comments section so that we can present them to our panelists. But if you're joining us here in person, then our moderator will select questions that you've left for our panelists to address. So please join me in welcoming Paul Vickery.
Thank you. It's good to be here this evening to celebrate the history of Tulsa. Excuse me, I'll take my hat off inside. I'm surprised to see so many gentlemen without hats on. I didn't know that hats had gone out of fashion, but anyhow, I'm glad that you're here tonight. We're here to celebrate the history of Tulsa. You know, we're here, the Great War has just ended a few years ago, and I've built my new home, Arlington, just 4 years ago, and it's great now to look at that home modeled after the home of Robert E. Lee, probably my favorite hero. As we begin this new year of 1924, may the spirit of the pioneer, the spirit that built Tulsa, prevail as of yore. We now face the challenges with the ascendancy of the Republican Party, particularly there in Washington, but better days will come again when the Democrats will once again be in power. You know, Tulsa did not just happen. While the settlers here were all poor, all of us that came here were poor, I don't think any of us was worth more than $5,000 as we settled this area. I don't believe the Creator ever put down in one place so many pioneers with the vision of state and city building as of here in Tulsa. Indian, white, Jew, Protestant, Catholic. We worked side by side, shoulder to shoulder. And under these conditions, the Tulsa spirit was born and lived, and may God grant that it never die. This is what we call the Tulsa spirit. I'm used to getting an applause after that line. You know, here is what the Tulsa spirit means. When a stranger came into town on a covered wagon, we fixed him up. We gave him a place to stay, fed him, and maybe sent him on his way. If a contribution was needed to bury an outlaw a little slow on the draw against the sheriff, we took a contribution up to bury him. Before we had a government system to raise taxes and for public works, old Sam Kennedy, George Perryman, and I simply closed our shops, rolled up our sleeves, and went out and fixed the roads. We did it ourselves. We didn't rely on government or anything else to do it. We were the personification of the Tulsa spirit. We all saw a place that was ripe for growth of business and a place where we all wanted to raise our family. Well, maybe I ought to start from the beginning to kind of tell you how I got here and what my role has been in the formation of this great city. I'm originally from Missouri, and I worked hard all my life. At age 17, I found myself selling shoes. Seemed like a good business. Everybody needs shoes. Shoes wear out. People need shoes again and again. Kids grow, they need shoes. It seemed like a good business, and it was during the course of that business that I had a relative that was down here as an itinerant Methodist preacher. And he traveled all over this area, and he said to me, he said, "Tate, I think you ought to go down into Indian territory and see what's going on down there. They just built a railroad. There's some coal mines opening up in that area, and I think it might be a good place for a young man like you to go and start a new business." So I came down here in 1890. As I recall, there wasn't much then, really. There was the railroad, there was the coal mines, there was a Masonic lodge, and maybe a lumber yard to help us build our homes, but there wasn't much else but that here. In 1890, I opened my general merchandise, and I can still see that sign sitting right above the door. It said, "Tate Brady, General Merchant, highest prices for furs, for hides, and wild game. $1's worth of honest goods for $1 in good money." Well, in 1898, I was one of the founding fathers here signing the charter that started this great city. A couple of years later, in 1901, when the Red Fork oil field struck oil, people began to pour into this area. And I began to prosper as a businessman. And this area really began to have some potential. And I saw a need there. And so the next year, I opened up a hotel. Now, my hotel, the Brady Hotel, was the first one in the area to have baths. I mean, you could get a bath in my room. You didn't have to go to the bathhouse to get a bath. And you know, actually, some of you may not know this, but we had what we call the Tulsa bath. Now, some of you have seen the Arkansas River and realize that it's not much of a river. But if you wanted to take a bath in Tulsa, it was 3 stages. One is you filled up the bucket with water, then you let the dust settle to the bottom. Then you get in, wash yourself clean, get out, and wipe the dust off. I mean, that was a Tulsa bath. In 1903, I was responsible for getting the first bridge across that Arkansas River so that we could get to those men in the oil fields and bring them the goods that they needed, the business that they needed. And we were proud of that. They said it couldn't be done, but we did it. In 1905, a tremendous event happened in my life. I married into the Cherokee tribe when I married Rachel Davis. Soon after, they made me an honorary member in that tribe, and I am very happy and very proud to be an adopted member of the Cherokee tribe. Right after my wedding, I made the first trip back east to sort of boost Tulsa, to let people back east know what was happening out here in Indian Territory. They had no idea what was going on around here. So we raised about $10,000, and we hired a train. We had 87 of the top business leaders with us on that train, and we went with a rope artist whose name was Bill Rogers. We traveled 2,500 miles building and talking about and promoting Tulsa, and our goal was to put Tulsa on the map. People didn't know about Tulsa before, but after we traveled, and old Bill Rogers would get out there and whirl that rope around, and people soon began to know and want to know, where is Tulsa? What's going on out there? What are y'all doing down there? So we had the opportunity to tell them. We made another trip in 1908, and President Theodore Roosevelt himself gave us a tour, a parade down Fifth Avenue in New York City. Why, I was never so proud in my life as to go, even though he was a Republican, I was never so proud in my life as to represent Tulsa in that parade. You know, as we went, we used to chant some things, and you probably have heard these. But you know, we used to say, boost your city, boost your friend, boost the lodge that you attend, boost the street on which you're dwelling, boost the business that you're selling. Y'all don't sound very excited about that. Well, we also had another saying that we would shout as we rode in those trains, and I'll give you the decent version of it, because we're in mixed company tonight. Come on, everybody, get off the grass. We're from the home of natural gas, from Indian Territory, and don't give a rap. So move on to Tulsa and get on the map. Thank you, thank you. We needed boosting. We didn't even have our first paved road until 1907. The cattle would come right down Main Street. One of the biggest industries we had was the cattle that would move it on up into Kansas and at the railhead here. And downtown Main Street used to be filled with cattle, mud, up to where they couldn't even get the carts through there. We had to get out and help them push those carts through Main Street. We just couldn't take the time to keep the traffic off it long enough to pave it. We were so busy here and making so much money and doing so well with that cattle that we wanted to let it go. So we did that until 1907. You know, I'm not meaning to brag, but my good friend, the attorney S.R. Lewis, said something about me. As you know, I'm a pretty modest individual by nature. I heard that. By nature, I'm a pretty modest individual, but Mr. Lewis said about me, the attorney, he said he did more in the early days to advance Tulsa as a coming metropolis than any other individual. He said I was a seer, a prophet who saw the potential of Tulsa and worked at it. I tell you, one of the biggest coups that I had, one of the biggest events that boosted the economy of Tulsa was in 1918 when I brought the Sons of the American Confederacy here to Tulsa. We had 40,000 individuals come to this city. And the hotels were full, the restaurants were full, the businesses were doing a booming business. As you know, it was just before that we got involved in the Great War. Thank God that is now over. But you know, Tulsa was a very patriotic city. Almost the entire football team of Kendall College, which is right down the street here, I think you call it University of Tulsa now. At Kendall College, almost the entire football team volunteered to fight in that war. we built and we formed and we sent to France an ambulance corps called the Tulsa Ambulance Corps. Our women provided more than 1 million surgical bandages for our troops over in that war. And more than 15,000 soldiers passing through this part of the country stopped at Tulsa, where our women would be out there, I don't care if it was midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, giving them donuts, iced tea, ice cream, coffee. They remember that to this day. It was a very, and still is, of course, a very patriotic city. This was the Tulsa spirit in action, getting behind our troops, getting behind those who were serving us and defending us overseas. Unfortunately, we had some in the city that were not exhibiting the Tulsa spirit. We had, at that time, members of the International Workers of the World, sometimes known as the Wobblies. Now, this group came out of the Northwest. This was a socialist, anarchist, anti-capitalist labor union. They advocated taking away the business owner's ability to control his business and giving it to the workers. The workers, the Wobblies, were so anti-patriotic, they were actually controlled by the Germans. They wanted to set up something here in Tulsa, what was being set up over there in Russia. They wanted to set up, they wanted to take away our ability to control our own businesses. And during the war, they advocated sabotage. They would have sabotaged our industry in order to prove their point and in order to take charge of our businesses. We could not allow this. The businesses got together, and I personally offered $50 a head for every draft dodger that would be turned in to our authorities. We offered $50. If you were a draft dodger, you were not going to get away with that in Tulsa. Other slackers, as we called them, were those who did not support the war effort. Now, you know, we had to pay for that war somehow. And the way we paid for it was the sale of war bonds. Every patriotic American bought war bonds. If you didn't, you were a slacker. And we would find you out and take care of you. We were just a patriotic group here. Yes, they were a socialist militant union who wanted to do away with our capitalistic system and institute something akin to what they had in Russia. Well, I know just a couple of years ago we had that problem with the race riot. Now, I personally had nothing to do with that. And although I was a member of the Klan and a proud member of the Klan, my father had fought in the Confederacy. And it was our goal to continue the Southern values of gentleman conduct, the Christianity, the fundamental Christianity that this country was based upon. It was our desire to continue that way of life. And I was a member of the Klan. And I was proud of it. But they kicked me out because I didn't toe their line, because I didn't agree with everything they said. Sure, we roughed up some fellas now and then. The boys got a little hard with people now and then. But that's what they needed. That's what they understood. They were rough men. They needed a touch of the lash every now and then to straighten them out, to let them know who was in charge, to take care of them slackers so that we didn't set bad examples for others. Now, the race riot itself, I stood guard not far from here to make sure that nothing happened, that the races could be separate. And that was always my philosophy. The colored people had their part of the town and stayed in there and had their businesses and had their way of life, and we had ours. And that's the way I wanted it to be. But unfortunately, some got riled up, and some went out and did violent things. And that wasn't anything I supported. So I got thrown out of the Klan. But anyhow, I digress. I just wanted to say that the Tulsa spirit is alive and well. And I can see it in your faces that you agree with the Tulsa spirit. So let me just remind you of something. I want to close with this that says, boost your city, boost your friend, boost the lodge that you attend, boost the street on which you're dwelling, and boost the goods which you are selling. That is the Tulsa spirit, and that is what I wanted to say to you tonight. And you all have a good night.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. What you have just heard, I think, has been the common narrative of Tate Brady and what the community has known for a long time here in Tulsa. It's true that Tate Brady did a tremendous amount to boost Tulsa, and Tulsa, in turn, did a tremendous amount to boost Tate Brady. Today we have Brady Street, a number of businesses that bear the Brady name, the neighborhood, Brady Heights, and the Brady Arts District. And it's no secret for years now that Brady was in the Klan. Don Ross brought this out in his research many years ago. Thousands of Oklahomans were in the Klan at the time, but thanks to the new report by Leroy Chapman, we know that Brady was no ordinary Klansman. He participated in violence, and he helped bring a national Klan leader to Tulsa. He even owned the property upon which the Klan built their massive temple. In a sense, Tate Brady was an architect of the race riot. This land has no position on what should be done about the Brady name, nor does it have any private interest in whether the names change or remain. We've simply brought you the facts about Tate Brady, and now we're inviting our community to voice their opinions. So please join us in welcoming our panel moderator, Ray Piercy. Ray, would you come up, please? Ray is a lifetime Tulsan, a writer, management consulting, and public policy professional. And if the rest of our panelists wouldn't mind coming up as well at this time. Ray's been a city planner, a technology executive. He's written for La Semana, for the Oklahoma Eagle. He has written for Current Land and for This Land. Currently, he's a columnist for Urban Tulsa Weekly, where he writes Cityscape, a weekly op-ed on city politics, public policy, planning, the environment, economic development, and Tulsa futures. So, Ray, thank you.
We're waiting for the panel to assemble, and then our schedule tonight calls, well, I'll introduce all of the players on the panel, and then we're going to have 3 to 5 minute presentations from each one of them, and then we're going to they're going to take some questions that I've got in my pocket that come from people here in the audience as they came in. So it's going to be a great event. This is a wonderful panel. I want to take 20 seconds and thank Michael and his board and backers for doing something wonderful and provocative, which is and it's not raising my microphone. And with that, I guess we'll get underway. Let's see. Jim Goodwin is an attorney of significant measure here in Tulsa. He's been practicing law since the late 50s. He's one of the first black professionals to do so. He is also publisher and principal executive at the Oklahoma Eagle. He's on the board of directors of the City County Health Board, has been since 1968. He's been on the TU board and on the board of Bank of Oklahoma and OU, and done a whole variety of things. And he's been a leader in human rights and the civil rights movement in this town long before I was born and long before most of the people in this audience were born. So Mr. Jim Goodwin. The fellow right next to Jim is Seneca Scott. He is a member of the Oklahoma State House of Representatives. He's been there for a couple of terms. He's up for re-election. He is arguably one of our finest elected officials. He represents the environment, or he's interested in the environment and energy and urban ag and a whole variety of things that are arguably highly material to the future of this state. And I consider him a friend and a very big contributor. He's sitting right next to Senator Judy, who I've known for a long time, since I was a child, essentially. And she represents, or has been representing, District 11 here in Tulsa in the state Senate. Before that, she was in the House of Representatives. She brings 31 years of experience as a senior manager with the Department of Health and Human Services, their Child Welfare Division, and 16 years on the Tulsa School Board, where she did lots of great stuff and never made a nickel. An amazing post, the school board. Lots of responsibility and very little else. Judy. A fellow here is Mr. Adam Nitmick, who I only recently met. He is a technology executive. He's managing partner for New Media. It's a technology, systems engineering, and interactive marketing company located in the Brady area. And Adam has been at it for since 2000, when the firm got underway. For Adam. And lastly, Mr. William O'Connor, who is an attorney here in town. He is a shareholder and director of Newton, O'Connell, Tatum, and Ketchum, a very large firm here in town that does complex litigation, state and federal litigation. I've got these words here in front of me. They're a little fuzzy. They do energy, class action work, insurance, securities, and a bunch of other stuff. He's also the president of the executive committee of the Oklahoma Community and the Community and Change Justice Commission, or I should say organization. It used to be down the road. And he is here with us. He's also been on the board of directors of Bishop Kelly High School here in town. And so with that, I guess we'll get underway. Who's the hot dog? Who wants to go first? Seneca, you look anxious. Do it, man. If you like, or you can just use that portable mic. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
It's working.
Well, good evening.
Good evening. Okay. Well, I just got back to Washington, D.C., went to a health conference there, and a couple of the things that came up was Tulsa, and they said, so what do you guys do there? What's it like in Tulsa? And I think that that's one of the things, just like in reading the article oftentimes, is that as much as our story's been told, it's also we still have to tell the story. Judy and I were sitting over here next to each other, kind of laughing about the Brady impersonation because we still have that underway today. We're talking about a trip this fall to go to another major city and talk up our virtues and various elements. But one of the things I've thought about in the last couple of days is the way in which we come to terms with some of our history is part of how we tell that story. And the fact that we're beginning to tell the story alone is part of our maturation as a city and as a state, because I think that oftentimes we're prone to be hard on ourselves, and as one who's native from here and a big fan of the community, you want to see us do our best. And it's hard also when you come back from Washington, D.C.'s airport or DFW, and you fly into Tulsa, and well, you realize we have a long way to go still. But you want to see us go a lot further. There's a lot of ways we might get there. But part of that, getting to where we want to go, is creating an endpoint that allows everybody to participate. I think for much of this community's history, we've got a lot of elements that haven't always been leveraged. So I'm going to choose to focus on that as my response to the readings, which Mr. Chapman did an excellent job in his works. And I think we should all just, since I'm the first one to take the initiative, let's give him a big round of applause. Everybody. Telling that story is a delicate process by which we also start to set the endpoints for where we want to go as a community in the 21st century. So I chose to share, we have some neat things going on. I said we've got this renaissance in downtown. Matter of fact, on a lot of the health issues that are being addressed nationally, Dr. Clancy, the Chamber of Commerce, some of the efforts that are underway are actually leading. And I didn't really realize that because I don't always get off the North Tulsa farm very often. But in this chance, I was off the farm and realizing that we're doing some good work relative to addressing food deserts, grocery store cultivation, even just acknowledging through the health department some of the health indicators that we have in our most sensitive zip codes here in the city, many of which are residents who are generational offspring of the things that happened during this time period of Mr. Brady and the riots. Those people are constituents, living persons still in this community. Okay, so this is very real. I see that as an opportunity to really tell our story. I first came and participated in meetings with Reuben Gant, Julius Piggies, and they were using the phrase to go from tragedy to triumph, the retelling of the area, the history. I thought that was awesome. And I think it remains to be seen the extent to which the state legislature, which Senator McIntyre and I served in, have fulfilled their obligations, have fulfilled the duties of which recommendations and various reports have stated that should be sort of our call to action. And I also would say, I think in reinventing the area, it's as much to say someone's getting excited. For reinventing the area as much as anything is to see the connections between the urban and rural. Because we're out there, you also have this issue underway that's being discussed with the Cherokee Nation and the Freedmen. As much as anything, a story of history. I studied Native American Studies and History at the University of Oklahoma. This is like my favorite subject, all this stuff. So currently, that's underway. If you're not familiar, we could talk about it in other terms. But you have this urban-rural interface, and you've got the towns around Tulsa where many of the early 1900s, folks would have come from relative to a lot of the agrarian economy underway. Redbird, Tallahassee, Clearview. Raise your hand if you're familiar with any of those towns. Some folks? Well, those are the historical black towns in Oklahoma, which in many ways can be a very exciting thing for us to look to revitalize, while we also tell the story of the significance of Oklahoma, and the significance of sovereignty, the significance of self-determination, and the significance of a very unique slice of American experience where all black towns were being created in the late 1800s. And that is something we should be proud of, just as much as we acknowledge the history that tonight we're not as proud of. So, thank you for listening.
It says that we have about 5 minutes. Okay.
Rigidly enforced.
Rigidly enforced. Okay. As much as I love Seneca and work with Seneca and respect Seneca and know that he does a wonderful job of representing his district in 72, I have to disagree with him on some things. Maybe because I'm a child of the 60s. Maybe because I lived here in Oklahoma all of my life. When I read that, oh, can you hear me? Yeah. Maybe after, when I read that article about Brady, first of all, I knew nothing about it, never heard anything about it. And my first thought was, Brady district is in my Senate district. And when I look at his history, there's nothing that I could be proud of. I know he said that he was kicked out of the Klan, but where was he when people needed him? Did he try to stop any of the stuff that was going on? No, he did not. And the legislature has not begun to fulfill any of the things that they needed to do. Our community, North Tulsa community, is still struggling. And then we now live in a political atmosphere where anything goes. You can tell the African American president, you're a lie. You can call him a monkey. You can call him all the things. And listen to what happened at the Tea Party debate last night. This is the atmosphere we're in. And when, maybe somebody else, when they speak, will have a whole different opinion. But I haven't had this anger since the 60s. And it seems like we're right back where we started. Now, there's been a lot of progress. I'm not going to say that it hasn't. But when Dr. Clancy did his study that showed that in zip code 74106, the precinct that I live in, we're more likely to not live. There's a 14-year span. When you look at the jobs or the lack of jobs in the community, when you look at housing, when you look at the schools that have finally began to implement some kind of plan, when we look at the violence that's going on, then what I hear from the community, that spirit that Brady talked about, is their problem over there in North Tulsa. I'm not going over there because I'm afraid to go. And so what we have today, I think, is still a very divided city. I don't know where we're going, and I do think that these kind of discussions are very, very healthy. I don't want you to just look at my anger, because I know that there must be solutions, and those solutions rest within every individual. I used to think as a young social worker I could change the world, but I could only touch those that I come in contact with. And I look out there and I see a lot of people who have been active in women's organizations and all kinds of causes that I know are trying to make a difference. But I also had a friend who was running for the lieutenant governor, and a Democrat, and he told me as he went around the state that all you had to do was just mention Obama's name. And if you supported him, you had no support. And he was shocked at the use of the N-word when referring to the president. When President Obama won, I had to raise $2,000 worth of hell to get them to say president. Now this is the 21st century. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we have to do it together. This is a wonderful city. I've always said that Tulsa is so much better than Oklahoma City. The people are wonderful people. I'm biased to Tulsa despite all of its problems. But I think we have the most progressive people, and when we put our heads to it, we solve problems in Tulsa.
When asked to participate in this movement. I was very curious about what could I bring to the table that many of us have already thought about, and whether or not there would be something new and different. And even talking today to our moderator, I wanted to know, what is the goal? What will be the purpose? And what message must be left with those who are participating in this event this evening? We, as Judy has mentioned, and all of us that are here assembled, have lived through the 60s and before that. And by the way, Ray, I practiced law in 65, not the late 50s.
That's not what you told me.
Well, you're sharp memories. But I think it's important here. This is a prophetic moment. This is a process by which we are trying to, I think, focus on core values. In this rendition that was given to us this evening by Tate Brady, you could hear, even in his presentation, this embracing of core values. Now, certainly we are now reflecting on him as an individual. He talked about hard work. He talked about embracing other people from different backgrounds. And yet, he did what he did. And now we are here to remember him. When I was asked if I would participate in any kind of endeavor to rename the district, my view was, this is not my problem, this is a white man's burden. This is a thing that it's good for Tulsa to focus on its past, but there are a lot of great men who, on Sunday morning, every Sunday morning, I pronounce in the Creed, the Apostles' Creed, the name Pontius Pilate, a man who, through his indifference, is known. He's famous. We don't celebrate. Can the name of the district be a point of celebration, as our moderator and I talked about earlier today? Or is it something that we will, now that we're informed about this man's past, is it something that we, as a citizen of this community, will continue to abide by? I mean, the Confederate flag, I asked Ray today, does the Confederate flag still fly over any state capital today? I didn't Google it, so I can't answer the question presently. But again, I think what we ought to reflect here on is as Judy has mentioned, race is still a very obvious part of our American fiber. She mentioned the attitudes of the president. I think the detractors of the president are the same detractors who voted against him, and they're most vocal during this race, but during the race for the presidency. Race is very much, I suppose, live, and in fact, I think, Judy, one of your colleagues in the House of Representatives put us on the map, Ms. Kern, not long ago, when she made some insinuations about the work ethic of African Americans. Having said all that, and trying to focus, though, on the moment in which we are here assembled, the question that I guess our moderator mentioned earlier, and Mike mentioned, is this is a time of remembrance, not necessarily to denounce, not necessarily to criticize, but I think to reflect upon what it means to us today in our own moment. I noticed the other day that I guess several months ago, one of our legislators at the city council wanted to, and I don't know whether he succeeded, wanted to name Cincinnati Martin Luther King. And what's interesting about that, he may have succeeded, but it only goes as far as the North community goes. Which to me, not to condemn and not to complain or to criticize, but Dr. King was more than an African American. He is a world leader who, and his impact has changed the world. And for this city to abide by the naming partially of the street, in a sense, is a dishonor to him. And it ought to be. People ought to universally embrace what he meant to us and to many Americans and the legacy that he left. But Tulsa, and it should be embraced citywide, but Tulsa has not yet reached that point. So as I sit here, I think it better end. But I think as we have this discussion this evening, we ought to reflect upon what this means to us today. Is that district something that we want to remind us of our ways, of our history? Is it something that we want to embrace? Is it something that we want to renounce? I think Julius McGee's, I come out of his generation as well, has done a significant thing in founding the John Hope Franklin Center, Reconciliation Center, on the fringes of Brady. And I think and hope that his work will be reflected more in this body and embraced by this body, because it's not about hating people, it's not about belittling people, it's about celebrating our diversity. And the new group of people inhabiting Brady, maybe there will be a desire to reflect reconciliation as opposed to a destructive force that once ruled our city.
Two geeks, no mic.
There we go.
Hello? I think that was out of range. Let's try this again. I don't think I'm meant to be yeah. Hello? Hello?
Can everybody hear me? A little bit louder? Is that better? All right. My name's Adam Nimick. I think it's probably appropriate for me to explain why I'm up here. I'm not a state senator. Hi. All right. How about that? All right. I think it's probably appropriate for me to explain why I'm up here. I'm not a state senator. I'm not involved with the press. What I am is, I think it's appropriate for me to explain what my role is and what I'm bringing to this conversation. And to do that, I have to tell you, I think I really do have to tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a native Tulsan, born and raised. 11 years ago, my business partner and I faced a decision when we were thinking about building a company. And it's a technology consultancy company. And we had an option to move to either coast. We could go to California, we could go to New York. And we said, do we want to do that, or shall we stay here in Tulsa? And because we're both from Tulsa, we're both rooted here in Tulsa, we both have a history here in Tulsa. And we said, you know what, we're going to plant our flag here in Tulsa and found something great. And try to, we had a vision of Tulsa as a great city, as a great creative, progressive city. Now, it wasn't that at the moment, but we felt that we could contribute to that conversation. We felt that we could contribute to that movement, to the improvement, to the positive action that we saw as a growing undercurrent in Tulsa. Now, to that endeavor, for the first 5 years of our company's life, we had an internal model. It was called Beautify, motto, and it was called Beautify. It was actually an acronym for BTYFI, and that's better than you found it. And the idea was that we wanted to leave our clients, our work product, and eventually our community better than we found it. Now that sounds really, nice and everything. And we said, but we wanted to take action on it. How do you take action on that in the community? And the first thing that we did was we helped to found YP Tulsa, which was a very short-lived but dynamic and ambitious endeavor to try to make Tulsa into a progressive, creative, inclusive, pluralistic society that we could all be proud of, to bridge these great divides that are really here, to make sure that Martin Luther King Street actually moved past the divide that was Archer Street. And we had a couple of goals. One of them was to actually get a ballpark downtown, which was one of the things in 2004 that we pitched for, and eventually it actually happened. Yeah, that was a suggestion. And then the other goal was that, well, the other thing that we actually contributed to was that the new motto for Tulsa, which is a new kind of energy, that actually came out of YP Tulsa. It actually came out of my company, New Medio. And so we were proud of that, but we decided it was time to take even more action. We decided at that point we were renting an office, and we said we want to not just speak about it, but we want to really put our money where our mouth is. So we bought a dilapidated 2-story building at the northeast corner of Detroit and Brady, or Detroit and Archer. And we've been talking about Brady, it's in my head. Detroit and Archer. And it took us about 8 months to renovate it, but we were outside of Spaghetti Warehouse, the first professional occupants in that area. And it's always been my belief that a person has a civic responsibility to understand the history of where they live and where they work. And part of that is I'm just a naturally curious person, and growing up here in Tulsa, you hear rumors about the Tulsa race riot, but you don't really find out any information about it unless you dig. At least at the time when I went to school, which I graduated in 1994. I don't know if it's still the case, but I'm assuming it is. So having just purchased property right there on the northeast corner of Detroit and Archer, I said, it's time for us to actually find out a little bit about what we're doing here and where, what the precedence of this place has been. And in doing that, one of the books which I came across, was a book called Riot Remembrance by James Hirsch. He's the gentleman who wrote the book called Hurricane about Reuben Carter. And it's a very big book, a very in-depth book. It talks about not only the build-up to the riot, but also its aftermath all the way through reparations. And we were so impressed with the book that what we did was we actually licensed the rights to the screenplay and to try to actually create a movie about this. The idea was we didn't want to do it to promote ourselves. What we wanted to do, we were a technology company. What we wanted to do was we felt that it was important that we acknowledge that it happened in Tulsa. That we had 3 goals: that acknowledge that it happened in Tulsa, to try to. Oh, it's already time. All right. All right. I'll do something really fast. Anyway, on the Brady subject, I polled a lot of my peers. And what we polled a lot of my peers asking about what are their opinions. These are other entrepreneurs in Tulsa. These are other people who live and work in the Brady Arts District. What do you guys feel about what should happen? And it's really kind of interesting. There were 3 options. One of them was leave it as it is. The second one was definitely change the name. And the third one was come up with some way of acknowledging its past in some sort of another memorial or whatever. And it was actually pretty split, right, evenly in thirds. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and do something which is personal. This is not associated with anything, my business or anything else. I do feel that we should change the name. I do feel that I have a very small voice in it, a very small voice, but I do feel that it's something that I can affect. Whether it's just speaking here, whether it's actually in giving my voice to the other business owners in the area, but I do feel that we should change the name. I just don't feel that it's right. I don't feel comfortable with it. And I think that there are many other names that are possible. Now, what that other name is, that's beyond my scope. So, thank you.
My name is Bill O'Connor, and I'm president of the board of the Oklahoma Center for Community and Justice, and I'm glad to be with you tonight. I met a woman here tonight whose mother was a survivor of the race riot. I've met, can you hear me? I've met a lot of families who have suffered for generations, and I want to start with there's simply no way to value the lives that were lost, the emotional damage, the generations of injury that have passed on and on. So there's simply no way to value that or to to compensate or make that right. But what I do know is, I think we all are better off, and I think to a degree this article gives us in this land, tells us what we are capable of doing. It reminds us what we are capable of doing. And to that end, I think that's the first recognition, is are we really capable of doing those kind of deeds? And then I think we need to progress. And I think we need to go to the next step and say, now what are we capable of doing? And I think we've seen a lot of examples of what we are, as a society, capable of doing. I've been defending Tulsa and battling friends in Oklahoma City my whole life about Tulsa is better and Tulsa is better on this, this, and this. But I gotta say, after the Oklahoma City bombing, that terrible tragedy, I really feel like that city was energized, that it had been damaged emotionally and spiritually and economically, and I feel like that city came together following that tragedy. And I've been proud of what Oklahoma City has done. And I know I am 47 years in Tulsa. I love our community. So I refuse, and I think everybody in this room would refuse to be defined by what happened 90 years ago. I certainly am not going to be defined by that, and I don't want my children defined by that. In 1971, my sister came home from college and introduced her African-American boyfriend to my family. My dad was born in 1909. He had a very different view of the world than his children did. And I was, as I tell my siblings, much, much younger than the whole vast of the other kids. But she would not marry Gary until he approved of the marriage. And this was a man that was born in a very, very different generation. And he came around and he met Gary's family. And I'll never forget seeing them on our front porch visiting. And it wasn't just a 10-minute visit. They were out there all day. And you could see him start to laugh. You could see a friendship and a relationship building. And he, shortly thereafter, gave my sister that blessing. And she and Gary have been married for 35 years. I've got 3 beautiful nieces and nephews from that marriage. But one of the salient points that I remember was years later when I wanted to go, my dad passed away when I was 12, and I wanted to learn more about my dad. And I went to several of his friends and videotaped them, and I said, tell me some things that you remember about them. And his very closest friend said he will never forget, and the most meaningful moment that he recalled after 50 years of friendship was the day that he stopped by and my dad was on the front porch with Gary's parents and the transformation that he saw. And what that left me with is that we can't be guided by ignorance or fear. We have to instead be guided by opening our hearts and our economics and our communities to each other. Regardless, I don't even think in terms of race. I have people meet my brother-in-law and my nieces and nephews, and I see them a little bit startled, and I think, oh yeah, it's not part of the equation. So that's why I like the Oklahoma Center for Community and Justice so much, because what do? We try to do something about it. So we hit second graders in every Tulsa public school, every union school, and we're going beyond that. And we try to teach them the problems of prejudice and to remove that language, to open the doors to one another. And that's why we sponsor a Camp Anytown every summer. And we bring people of all races and all religions. And they spend a week together. And the letters that these high school sophomores and juniors write about their experiences will move you, will shake you, Because every time that happens, they're going back to their own family, their own school, their own job or community, and they're changing those hearts in each of those communities one by one. And there's nothing more meaningful to me than to see the life-changing experience and to hear these children in second grade and at 16 years of age talk about how their lives changed. And then we go to Williams and we go to Roanoke and we try to have diversity summits where these issues are talked about and embraced, and we get rid of the language of fear. And instead we embrace the language of togetherness, not being defined by the past. Where are we going forward? That's why I like this organization. That's why I want you, be a volunteer, go to a school that's not in your comfort zone and talk to them about what this is really about. We need not only development in North Tulsa, but when it happens, we need to use North Tulsa companies to do the work. And why is there a division here? We are too smart to hear about North Tulsa and South Tulsa. We are beyond that. We can recognize our past, we can acknowledge what we're capable of doing, and now I think we acknowledge what we're capable of doing going forward. So I'm here tonight on behalf of OCCJ, but I'm also here as a Tulsan to say, let's come together and change the language, eliminate the fear, live with one another. Thanks.
We have the writer of this fabulous piece that this forum has been organized, Mr. Leroy Chapman, with us. He's going to fabulous piece. Going to address, we've got about 11 questions here, and I think we're going to have time for most of them, but in any event, he's going to address 3 technical questions that came from the audience, and then I'm going to hand out these other questions to the panelists. Leroy, you want to come up? He's going to read the questions and answer them.
Make an attempt to answer them. The first one is, there's a lot of focus on Mr. Brady. What about others and their families who have deep roots in Tulsa? Do we know their histories? I would imagine the KKK had its hands in the quote-unquote progress of many white wealthy families in Tulsa. What if that is so? Where does that lead this discussion and others like it? And will someone perform this research? There are other families that we know of, but again, you know, the Klan shouldn't really be the focal point. More their actions, I think, should be what we look at. But yeah, I mean, this story is ongoing, and it's really kind of what this land's doing is creating a kind of a counter narrative to what the official history of Tulsa has been. And I also wanted to say that the name change keeps coming up, and I really think that's like somebody said, it's kind of the lowest fruit on the tree. You know, for change to happen, it's like kind of something that's accessible, that can, but I think what's more important is that we hold the institutions like Tulsa Historical Society and Oklahoma Historical Society accountable for the information. there's a second question. Has consideration been given to the creation of a Truth and Reconciliation Committee for Tulsa and/or pardons for the wrongfully abused IWW members? Not to my knowledge. I know in Centralia, Oregon, I believe, there was a similar incident where some Wobblies were murdered, and the city there has a memorial to them and to the history of their fights for equal rights in the labor movement. But nothing here in Tulsa that I know about. According to a court transcript, Brady has been accused of voting for the wrong Democrat by the KKK. What was the OK Republican Party of those days like that the KKK despised them? Well, Lincoln was a Republican and he was responsible for the Emancipation Proclamation, so traditionally it became the party of the African Americans. And the Democrats, they called them Dixiecrats. It was, deep Southern roots in the Democratic Party, and that's what Brady represented, was that faction of the Democrats.
Thank you, Leroy. First question is for Mr. Goodwin. And Jim, I want you to try to respond in 30 seconds. I know you can do it. 30, 35, 40 seconds. Mr. Brady called the KKK a disgrace after he resigned. He found redemption in his later years. Who is against redemption, Jim?
Certainly, I am not against redemption.
Closer.
I am not against redemption. The man did commit suicide. Why he did that, maybe his acts came to haunt him. I don't know, but certainly, I tried to in my remarks suggest that we should focus on acts and not on people, and that certainly these acts are most relevant here amongst us today. One thing, though, if I might, although you cautioned me for 35 seconds.
I'm cautioning you again.
I just want to address, Bill O'Connor mentioned that we need to change languages. And those of many of you, Dr. Clancy, I know knows this. One of the ways to stop looking at North and South, and particularly, I think it was very prominent here when he said North Tulsa. Most of us don't recognize that when we put the N word before the T, you know what section of town and the type of people, many people think, live in that community. I suggest that if we're going to deal with nomenclature, if we're going to start looking at one another differently, perhaps I think a better designation is Tulsa North. Because when you say, put the N-word in front of that, so much baggage and prejudice accompanies it. And people who live in Tulsa North are not the illiterates necessarily. We're not the criminals necessarily. We're as hardworking folk. And I would commend and ask that people begin to look not as a separate part of this town, but to include us, if you will, and refer to this part of town as Tulsa North.
Well, Seneca, you're a history major, so this question is for you. There seems to be a fine line between criticizing the shameful parts of our history and erasing them entirely, and therefore forgetting about them and from whence we came. How does Tulsa, with its rich and sometimes painful history, strike that delicate balance?
Well, that's a great question. Wow.
We need a great answer.
We do. Yeah, thanks, Jude. Okay, well, I think part of it, we're starting that tonight, and have this conversation, and I'm going to pull a politician strategy here and talk about something else when I got asked a different question, but I'm actually going to say that for 6 months there's been a group of us meeting at Dr. Breckner and Dr. Carter's venue going after, good to see you guys, the National Register application, National Trust for Historic Places. And it's been an interesting process because we receive various levels of conflicting information consistently. That's the one thing that's been really interesting about it, is that at one stage we'll have a set of information, one stage we'll have another set of information, but we continue to come back and believe it or not, we've read most of the materials that are out there, like this National Park Survey done in 2005 that sort of looks at an larger overall area. And that was the first recommendation we got, that there was a 5th category we could pursue for this National Trust designation, and it was called a battlefield application. Can you guys hear me? A battlefield application used mostly in places where there had been actual battlefields fought before. But one of the things in this last month we talked about was how to link the Evans Spin Tube site that the city owns right around the corner from Greenwood into the property, so that part of the application is not just acknowledging the history in the past, but rather using the application as a process by which we demarcate history and past in the transition to building the area up in economic development. That you actually have the Greenwood area, including Evans Spin Tube, and you have some protections, and you have this acknowledgement of what was the general area under the battlefield designation. Really, I can tell you right now, we need all y'all's help here in the audience to make that happen. That would be my one plea for tonight, that we get behind that and that we make a request of the National Park Service for the city of Tulsa or the state of Oklahoma, once again, State Preservation Office, to be creative like that. And that's kind of my answer. Because that other question, I'm going to have to think about it for a while. It's pretty heavy. Thank you.
Good. Okay, Judy, you're on tap. Question is, why do we never have any political figures visit Ground Zero, that is Greenwood, to commemorate the terrorist attack that occurred there?
Excellent question. Well, for the same reason that that those same people have ignored what's going on in Tulsa North for years. It's not been important. It's not been anything that's been a part of anything that they need to know anything about. Look what happened with the race riot. I grew up in Tulsa. I never heard of the great race riot. People, and I lived in segregated Tulsa, and nobody talked about the race riot. It wasn't until Representative Ross, who did extensive kind of study and engaged the state, that forced them, as you said, to look at this situation. So, you know, it's kind of like what's going on today. I commend the rainbow of faces of people here. But you know, there are a lot of people in Tulsa with different colored faces that will sit at home, think that what we're doing today is ridiculous, and want no parts of it. You know, I don't know what it takes to get people engaged in being a part of building the total Tulsa. That part, I don't know. But I go back to the question that was asked, and that's a very good question. Why? Why did Tulsa Public Schools let the same schools be on the need to improve list from 1981 until now? Maybe they don't care.
Thanks. Okay, Adam, we've got what amounts to a real estate and development question for you. It says, how does the article in this land press affect whether or not you, generic you, would attend the Brady Heights home tour on September 25th? Or if you would view the Tate Brady Mansion at all?
Well, on September 25th, I'm actually going to be out of town, so.
Clever.
It's a good question, but I think one of the things that I wanted to address was that you need to acknowledge both sides of the story. And I think that the thing that I've learned in all of this is that it's important not only to understand what happened on the white side or what happened on the black side, but what happened across the board, and to try to figure out a way to mesh those perspectives together to come at the whole truth. And so I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to viewing the house, because it is, I mean, it is a part of the story. Now the question is, what do we do now about that?
Great. William, as a native Tulsa, and this is an educational question, as a native Tulsan who went to Edison Junior High School and Senior High School, there was not one history book that even mentioned Black history. True. Tulsa Public Schools should be in there and a part of this discussion, but it seems to have been swept under the rug. What's to be done?
Well, I think it's a great question. I'm really not here just to plug the Oklahoma Center for Community and Justice, but we have a very vibrant public policy committee that tries to stay ahead of a lot of issues. And one of the issues in our committee meetings has been how to change the language through education initiatives. So, you know, obviously not only should there be a lot of study of African American history, but there should be study about the race riot and its ramifications on an economic and vibrant section of our community. So, you know, those are things that we are working towards in the legislature. We're trying to assist on education and immigration and a whole host of issues, but that's one of those issues. And I think that we fear what we're ignorant of. And, you know, it's not until I remember visiting with some good friends who were of a different race, and they said that their parents simply believed there was too much of a difference to overcome. And I don't want that to be the sentiment of our generation. It's understandable. I mean, some of their parents were victims or survivors of victims of the race riot. But this whole curriculum idea is one that goes right at the heart of this fear and battling fear by education and by learning that we are really much more alike than we are different. Thanks.
Thank you, William. We're going to allow each one of the panelists to make like a 10, 15, 20-second closing comment, and then we've got a little in ceremony. Judy, do you want to go ahead?
First of all, let me say thank you to This Land. Thank you for the extensive article you've done. And thank you, Kevin Ross, for what you do. I recently got to Facebook, and Kevin keeps us informed ongoing, and I really, really appreciate that. This, to me, is a good step. I didn't really expect this many people to even be here. So this is really, really a good step. And one of the things that Seneca and I were talking about is, one of the things, there was an effort last session, and I think session before, to include the race riot in the curriculum. But it was dead on arrival. So when we introduce this again, those of you who want to make a change and do something different so that we can educate people, with people who have information, you're less likely to be fearful, you're less likely to be intolerant. And so what we've got to begin to do in Oklahoma is to educate people, because right now these same people are voting against their own interests because they are not educated.
Good comments, Judy. I would also say, you know, power to it. Good work from OCCJ down there in the end. I think the recommendation to the Greenwood, the committee was put together in the late 1990s by the state of Oklahoma, I remember Danny Goebel when he worked on that for the city of Tulsa. I think some of those need to be revisited just to see from an outcome standpoint where we stand now. What's been completed? What were some of the things that have been in discussion? Where are we with those? And then probably get behind it with a more contemporary version, post ballpark, post downtown Blue Dome and revitalization. And I think also something about this discussion that's been mentioned tonight was that Tate Brady, he took a lot of his frustrations out on some of these wobblies, and I think that that's worthy of note also, that as a community, we weren't just anti-African American, we were also anti-different perspectives. And I think that that's something as a city and state we need to look at, is the extent to which we're willing to still embrace divergent views, period. And that the IWW folks, the Wobblies, sounds like it was a pretty bad deal, worth acknowledging. And I wonder to which extent that they had a constitutional right to not participate in the war, is my understanding, and at least definitely a constitutional right to have an opinion about the war. So to the extent to which they were slackers and punished for it, I think is worthy of further look.
They were tarred and feathered.
Tarred and feathered. And also just see that it's not just a racial issue, that there's social justice elements relative to the mistreatment of workers and mistreatment of different versions of capitalism. Thank you.
I too want to give express my appreciation to this man, and to Mike and Mr. Leroy for this endeavor. But if there's one thing that I would challenge this group to focus on, is to contact Julius, because he doesn't know what I'm saying this to you.
Julius is here. He is the chair of the John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Group. And Julius, are you still here? Can you stand up, sir? Go ahead, Julius.
The reason I have focused on Mr. Pease is that he has wonderful ideas for making this area historically significant. He has worked hard to get what he has presently, but we do need much more community support for him to do the high-tech involvement recreation of this district, and to remember, if you will, the riot and the fact that people came together to rebuild. I would encourage you to do what you can to assist his endeavor, to visit with him about the plans there, and we can make this area a very historic place to be. And I think an incubator for small business development. I see Mr. Gant there for the Greenwood Chamber. We are missing the boat because we are not making this as significant place as it ought to be, and history dictates that it should be. And I think Julius and his reconciliation efforts, the fact that we must celebrate our diversity, there's beauty in that diversity, and that makes us strong. And I think if we can get behind his endeavor, Mr. Gant's endeavor, I think Tulsa will be the better for it.
Very good, sir.
I would just say, I think it starts with the articles in this land, I think, remind us of what we're capable of doing. I think we have to take the next step and say, who are we capable of becoming? And then with that, actually bring our concern, and everybody here tonight obviously has concern. We bring that concern with some action. And with that action, I think we can change the face of our families, our business communities, our schools. That's where we start to change the community. Lincoln said that we were all people are created equal. And that's a very fundamental and basic premise to saying, let's quit looking at our differences and let's embrace one another. Tolerance is not the word, it's embrace and learn more about each other, and let's become Tulsans together with no divisions. Thanks.
Go ahead, Adam.
All right. I just want to say thank you to the writers and editors and publishers of this land for continuing to bring up these kinds of discussions and to uncover these issues that are in our past and that lie in our past and that many times lie buried in our past, deeply, deeply buried. And I think in order to know, obviously it's a cliche, to know where you're going, you have to know where you've come from. But I think it's very applicable in this circumstance. And I really hope that this land and that those of you that are associated with the uncovering of these truths will continue to bring these issues to light, so that we can acknowledge them, so that we can discuss them, but so that we can not just talk about them, but actually, as Bill said, actually take action on them, take decisive action, not just discuss what to do, but then actually do it and move forward. I think this can be a great city. That's what I said 11 years ago. That's what I still believe now. And I think that it's people like Leroy and like Michael who are bringing these issues to light and who are publishing these things out there and keeping the conversation going. Thank you.
I just want to, if you work for this land, stand up, and we should recognize that. Everybody there around the applause. You know, you give me a standing ovation, but it's just time. You know, it's just how we spend our time. You know, and if you really care, and obviously you do, we're all busy, and we came out and, you know, taking time out of our lives. But if it's really important to you, you know, dedicate some time, discipline yourself, and start studying. You know, I'm no different than anyone else out there, except I may be a little more OCD. But you know, it's up to all of us to do this work. You know, and so if you've enjoyed it or you have a passion for it, I'd encourage you to. You know, take it upon yourself to do it.
And I want to reintroduce the architect of this project and the article, Mr. Michael Mason.
Thank you all for coming out here tonight. It's particularly encouraging as an editor to see this kind of conversation occurring. But you know, the reality is that this is what powerful journalism looks like. So we have to support writers like Leroy Chapman. We have to call upon each other to, you know, bring these stories forward. You know, many of you in the audience have contributed already to this land, and we hope that you'll continue to do that. For those of you who want to see more stories like this, certainly invite you to subscribe to this land because we want to be a reader-supported entity. With that, I'd like to introduce for our closing remarks Reverend Marlon Lavenhar of All Souls Church. He'll offer some closing words on this, so thank you very much.
I want to thank Michael and Ray and all the panelists for just a fantastic evening. It's the beginning of a really important dialogue in our community, and it's great to see so many people out there. When I was first invited to do this, I thought that they were just asking me to do a blessing at the end, a benediction, like I usually am asked to do at events like this. And then when they wrote me back with the details, they said they actually wanted me to offer some closing comments. And so I'm really pleased to do that. I hope that will be a blessing. Well, it's something that I say will be a blessing to our city. And to this process. I think the question that's before us was stated at the beginning by the presentation from Tate Brady. We're talking about Tulsa's spirit. What is Tulsa's spirit? I hope that dialogues like this represent Tulsa's spirit today, not what Tate Brady represented back then. Tate Brady said, you know, Tulsa's spirit, this is about a place where we want to raise our families. We want to raise our children. Well, when I think of raising my children, here, I want to raise my children in an inclusive community where there isn't a divide between North and South, between the races, between the religions. I want to find this to be a place where everybody feels welcome. And so these kinds of dialogues are going to happen, and sometimes they're uncomfortable. And so I also want to say that if the idea was that I would get up here and make everybody feel good before we went home, that's also a bit of a misconception, because I want to offer some provocative thoughts as well. But let me just acknowledge the three camps that were stated earlier. There's the idea of do nothing. There's the do nothing camp, that just leave it alone, don't stir things up. There's the camp of let's take the name off of Brady, let's call it something else, and that's a very legitimate part of this conversation, and I think we need to obviously have some dialogue around whether we change the name. And then I would like to introduce a third concept. Well, it's been introduced in some ways, but I'd like to elaborate a little bit on a third possibility that I find very intriguing, and it's the idea of restorative justice. Restorative justice is a movement that's happening all across the land, looking for ways in which it's a healing approach to justice. Will taking the name off create healing in the community in and of itself? Probably not. Will leaving it alone and doing nothing create healing in the community? Probably not. So how can we engage in some type of restorative justice movement around not just Tate Brady, but all the different people who are represented and heroes and heroines of our community who also have a past that has been detrimental to our history as well. Restorative justice is about repairing the damage of the past. It's a systemic approach. Instead of looking at one thing, we're talking about let's engage the community in a dialogue. And part of the issue of restorative justice is to talk to the victim and ask the victim, for example, in a crime situation, to ask the victim, what would it take to help you feel like there was some redemption, some restoration, where you can move to a place of forgiveness? What do you need? And so in this case, obviously, the events that happen are long ago, but we also, as we've heard in the panel, there's so many ways in which they continue to plague our community. So I think part of this is identifying who are the victims that are still remaining. What is the legacy? And let's engage the folks who have been most harmed by what Tate Brady did, and ask those folks, what do they think would help? Instead of doing it from a top-down kind of way in which a lot of these dialogues happen. I said I wanted to be a little provocative. Someone handed me as I was walking up here something from the Urban Tulsa. It's an advertisement for George's Pub in Jenks, Oklahoma. I've never been there myself, but the ad here says this Wednesday night apparently, you can come for $5 burger night with said Jenks only, capital O-N-L-Y, black bartender. So I don't know who is that? Who are they? Who's the audience that they're trying to appeal to? I don't get it. Is that a joke or something? Or is this George's Pub in Jenks? I don't know. They're only black bart. But anyway, that's tomorrow night apparently. And I'm not really advertising for them, but I'm just saying, what is that we have an ad like that? I don't really know what that means. But so let me bring this down to the conversation we're having. To bring an African American friend down to the Brady Tavern, what's the analogy? I mean, is the analogy bringing a Jewish friend down to Hitler's tavern, or to Eichmann's tavern? Is that? I mean, how comfortable am I bringing a friend down to Brady's tavern, knowing this history? I don't know. This is a part of the conversation I think we need to have. Is it like bringing a 9/11 victim's family to Bin Laden's cafe? So, probably pick a different restaurant, right? A different part of town than that. So I think the question is, what does it mean to have a district named after Brady, who was a notorious racist in our community? Or is it more like inviting someone to Thomas Jefferson Cafe? Thomas Jefferson is sort of, people try to say, because obviously he did a lot of great things. Our Declaration of Independence, the President of the United States. He also held slaves. He also slept with his slaves, had children with his slaves. So Thomas Jefferson is a more complex character who we have an easier time embracing than say Hitler, right, or Bin Laden. But he's part of our history. So I think these are the kinds of questions that we have to ask. What does it mean to have Brady's name on a tavern, Brady's name in a district, and how comfortable are we as in an inclusive community, bringing our friends down there and using our tax dollars in that, or using our dollars down in that part of the town? So those are legitimate questions that we need to engage in. From a restorative justice angle, one of the questions we might say is, well, could we create a situation where on a certain week every year, a certain day every year. I don't know what that would be like, but to take a percentage of the proceeds of the Brady district and put that into some kind of a restorative model that creates economic justice in Tulsa North. Is there a way to do something with scholarships? I think of the story of Alfred Nobel and the Nobel Prize. Some of you know this story, and it's not a perfect analogy, but I think it starts to hopefully get our minds thinking about what's possible in terms of doing something to restore what's right. Alfred Nobel, the Nobel Peace Prize was created after Alfred Nobel's brother died, and the newspaper they thought it was Alfred who died, and they ran his obituary. The newspaper, the Tulsa World, has the obituaries for probably some of the people up on this panel and in the audience today, because they know these are famous people, and someday when they're gone, they want to be ready and have an obituary. So the next morning, Alfred Nobel woke up and got to read his obituary. In his obituary, he was the inventor of dynamite. And so his obituary talked about how this man changed the nature of war and killing and brought it from bows and arrows and guns and shooting into using dynamite to destroy, bombing huge communities. He brought killing, his invention brought killing to a whole new level and warfare to a whole new level. And he read this, he said, this is my legacy. This is how I'm going to be remembered. And so he started the Nobel Peace Prize because he wanted to be remembered for something different. And now when we think of Alfred Nobel, we think of peace instead of war and killing and destruction and violence. Now, I'm not suggesting that we try to take Brady's name into something that's good, but I do think that we can and have a responsibility to take these institutions that have benefited and names and people and history that have benefited from our community and figure out ways that we can turn it around so that their life's legacy starts to help and repair some of the damage that they created. So it's been a long night. I really appreciate everybody being here. That's my contribution. We're a really unique place in the history of this country. We're right in the center geographically. This is the end of the Trail of Tears, and there's an unbelievable story of survival in that story, as well as the story of deprivation and violence. There's also the story of the race riot, which we keep talking about, but it was also Black Wall Street. And that's a part of our history. And we can't claim and celebrate that part of our history and the black townships and those pieces of our history while we're still not getting right with the race riot and race massacre, as you will. So we have to get right with that so that we can then claim the positive piece of the history, which is that this was a place where African Americans post-slavery, post-Civil War were coming and beginning to live the American dream. Let's rebuild that part of Tulsa where people of all different walks of life can come and build the American dream for themselves and then not have it torn down. Lastly, I'll just say that it's not going to happen through a dialogue like this, unfortunately. It's not even going to happen from good journalism. It's only going to happen if we organize. So somebody's going to have to organize. There's going to have to be some organizing behind a movement if we are going to actually do anything serious. I know the YWCA is doing some great work to end racism. OCCJ is doing some great work to end racism. A lot of our churches and religious organizations are trying to do work. So we need to organize and try to make a difference, because that's the only way. Product of the 60s, I know that we've already heard this, that the only way it happens is through people organizing. So let's get organized and let's make Tulsa the city we want it to be. That's the Tulsa spirit, I hope.